Welcome back to another episode of the Stop Doing Stupid Stuff podcast. Today, Andreas Wieman and Tim Keefe are taking the mic to tackle one of the wildest workplace trends hitting the headlines. PricewaterhouseCoopers, one of the biggest consulting firms in the world, has rolled out a controversial plan to track employee locations with geo-fencing and phone tracking. The duo brings their combined experience and no-nonsense attitude to the table, pointing out the ridiculousness of over-surveillance and what it means for employee autonomy and company culture. Oh, and don't miss this. Today's episode kicks off the launch of the Stop Doing Stupid Stuff Award, where Andreas and Tim will highlight the worst corporate decisions each week. You'll even get the chance to nominate some winners of your own. So sit back and enjoy, because Andreas and Tim are here to keep it real and help companies stop doing stupid stuff.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another Stop Doing Stupid Stuff podcast with myself and the notorious Tim Keefe. Tim, what are we talking about today?
Notorious sounds like I'm some kind of rapper, which is as far from reality as possible. Um, Actually, today, really fascinating. This article actually came out, I think, a couple of weeks ago now, and it was showed up in a couple of different places. But I'm going to comment that actually out of Fox Business News. And here again, you think about what the headline is, but it's company plans to track worker locations and return to office crackdown. And the name of the company is PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, one of the largest consulting and accounting
Consultants?
companies in the world.
Hmm. Yeah, interesting. I don't know. Maybe they're doing it and they're going to consult other companies to do it.
Yeah. Well, what they're doing in this, is this, they're going to actually use geo fencing and, find me functions on phones so that they can understand where their staff members are at all times. So, you and I both come out of contact center industry, which tends to be right down to the second. We
Yeah.
manage our employees to the second. In some cases, companies manage to the keystroke. How many bathroom breaks people take during the day, what the frequency is, et cetera, can be part of some cases a discipline hearing, right? Like, or
Yep.
a complaint from a client that, people are taking too many breaks, or you're taking too long on a call, and we track that to the second. Now we're starting to see some of that, which, by the way, is not it's not a great way to make company or make your employees feel like you trust them, right?
Yeah.
Or that
Agreed.
or that they have any autonomy to think outside the box, or in some cases they don't, right? And I think that's a shame when that's the program. But here you have an organization that is made up of what I would think, for the most part, are strong individual contributors, right?
Right.
These are MBA students. These are people who got into consulting because they want to bring their knowledge to the marketplace. I don't think they were thinking about having a tag on them that
An
shows
ankle
them where they
bracelet.
are. Well, yeah,
Tim, you spent too much time at the coffee machine this week, all right? It was 2.5 minutes over quota. So what did you say? You had the highest sales quota of the. It doesn't matter, Tim. You were at the coffee machine 2.5 minutes above what we planned. Okay.
exactly. We're going to walk you out of the building now because of that.
Out of the building, not even work at home either. That's the other thing. That's a whole
Uh,
nother can of worms that I won't necessarily open on this call
well,
given the time.
but I do think, the next logical step is, if we have their location, we're going to put shock collars on people. I mean, I'm sorry, you're not working fast enough.
Well, is it
Um,
any coincidence that for those of you that have Netflix that are anime enthusiasts like I am, and so I go to Crunchyroll for that, so I don't want anybody roasting me because I'm a Netflix anime watcher, although Cyberpunk was awesome. But Terminator Zero anime just came out on Netflix. And I don't know, I kind of get a Terminator-ish, Skynet-ish type of vibe from, hey,
yeah.
you're in the office, I want to know exactly where you are. We geofenced you in stall number 4 for
Yep.
10 minutes, all right? You got to be more efficient at going number 2, Tim.
Well, I mean, we're joking, but it's to your point. And what's sad about it is, just like with coffee swiping and quiet quitting that we've been talking about for the last couple of years. Yes, you can say you have to be here, and you have to be here from this time to this time. And
Right.
even they've even put motion sensors under desks to validate that you're actually at your desk. And so, okay, what's next? And you and I both know that people will be looking for a new job.
Yeah.
Um, and no longer are you, as an employer, we used to have some control and say, okay, if I'm the dominant employer within 30 miles or 50 miles of my location, it's going to be hard for people to find other jobs. It's going to be hard for uh, them to compete with, look for other providers if I'm the only guy in
Well,
town.
what's the outcome that they're
Well,
expecting from this?
that's the challenge.
Like seriously though, if I'm a PwC executive and I put this policy in place and I have, my that what I'm expecting them to be at their desk doing, I guess apparently it doesn't matter what they do as long as they're at their desk, which is absurd to itself. But what if someone, let's use you as this fictional employee, Tim, if you're not at your desk for PwC the right amount of time that I expected you to be there, what is the coaching for that? Like, what, me as your manager, what am I going to do? I'm going to come to you and be, Tim, you got to be at your desk more. I went back and analyzed your ankle bracelet and I saw you were here, here, there. Let's cut this out so you'd be at your desk more now. How is that going to help PwC's P&L outcomes?
I Yeah, I don't know. I mean, so whether it does or doesn't appear to be part of the equation. And maybe they have some data that correlates location of their staff to a better economic outcome in terms of quality of work, number of projects, hours billable, et cetera. But I don't know. I mean, I haven't seen any data to that effect. What we have seen is that when employees are encouraged and given the resources they need to be successful, they've seen, uh, productivity go up quite a bit. In fact,
Right.
I do need to pull an article. I'll have to look for it. But there was a company in New Zealand. Everybody go, okay, New Zealand, that's not real. But there was a company in New Zealand that has been doing a 4-day work week for quite a while. And what's fascinating to that is they actually built a data model that shows that how effective that has been. So
Well, yeah, and here's the thing when you over engineer like what I think PwC is trying to do. You do it for everybody. And so I guarantee you in their model, they did not account for the high productivity level employees now that have to conform to this, you know, global policy.
and who are now
The
looking
impact
for,
the impact that's
yeah,
that's gonna have, like seriously, and the productivity that's got to come out from their contribution and be
yep.
redistributed to the existing workers. But here's the thing, you're making it a checklist, and you and I have talked about this before. We can't just be lemmings following a checklist. All right. We're in a different time. We're in a different era right now that is not going to, that's not going to work. That's not going to keep head above water for a lot of companies, whether you're P&L for profit or nonprofit, as a matter of fact. And so what you're doing is you're diluting and removing the solution finding and collaborative effort that really is the glue of company culture and
Oh, yeah.
figuring out how do you solve problems together so you're getting someone a policy that I'm making. Like here's another perfect example, as a matter of fact, so I'm not just typing hypotheticals. I did 4-day work weeks in my organization, and like look, it's not like I had a lot of people. It was only like 14,000 people and a quarter of $1 billion P&L responsibility, so it's kind of peanuts. But I would go to our teams and our frontline employees, and we would look at and we would you know, put, I'm trying to think about how I would say this, like slicers on the data to figure out who are the people that we want to talk to get their opinions on the high end and then on the low end and figure out what kind of common ground do we have to work with them and say, okay,
Right.
well, here's our proposal. We want to do 4-day work weeks. And we did 4-day work weeks. If you're in the CX industry and you ever talk about doing a shift bid, every time you do a shift bid, you immediately have a huge increase in shrinkage
Hmm.
in a bad way. And so I was always anti shift bids unless it was the last resort and kind of challenged my teams to say, go work with your people and just figure out how can we do something better for them. Because if they have a voice, at the table, they're going to believe in it more and they should. But then
Right.
also they're going to give us solutions we're not thinking of. We got a million things going on. I'm not thinking in the right mind with enough data and information to make an informed decision. But if I include the people that we're trying to craft the policy for, then guess what? I have that insight and I can get varying points of that insight from varying team members there. And it's a collaborative effort. And you know what? We didn't have to do shift bids ever on any of my teams. What we did is we came out and said, okay, here's a volunteer
Right.
program that you can opt into. And guess what? Productivity improved because we found volunteers. And the effort you get out of volunteers is way more powerful
Yep.
than what you get out
Yep.
of
Yep.
like quote unquote forced labor, forced
Oh,
decision.
oh, absolutely. And they also have those people who, when you allow them to have flexibility in their work schedule even their work environment, they recognize that that is kind of a privilege, right? Like you're giving them the extra. And my experience has been they always give extra back. Um, I'm just looking at this other article that would actually, this is a Forbes article about the 4-day work week. And there's a couple of really great quotes in here, and you can check on it if people want, but it's published in Forbes and it's about 4-day work weeks. And they talk about the changing role of leadership in here. And there's a great thing about I'm going to paraphrase and let you guys look at it, but it's like here are companies that when they try and understand productivity, particularly for white collar salaried workers, although sometimes that's a fine line between exempt and non-exempt here in the US, but what we would call traditional desk workers. It was okay, what's our productivity number? Hours in the office? Whoa, like what does that got to do with actual outcomes, whether
Right.
that's sales made or contracts written or consulting deliverables done or contracts closed or whatever the real business is what should be tracked. And this is where I think companies have gone off the rails for a long time, in that they're looking at the wrong metrics that don't get to the proper outcomes. Um, and that's the
Well,
fundamental
it's
to why we wrote the book. Stop Doing Stupid
right.
Stuff was about, hey, like, why are you measuring hours in the office? Is it a
Right.
game? Like we've all been there, right? Like who gets there earliest, who stays there latest, and when is the boss coming and when is the boss leaving? Because I want to make sure I'm, you know, they're over their schedule by 5 minutes or whatever. But it's all BS. It's doing jumping jacks in front of the boss. It's not accomplishing anything.
Well,
And
think about it though. They're finding a solution. The problem is they're finding a solution to a problem that was self-created that is not going back towards P&L delivery or successful outcomes for the
right,
organization. And so if you find a way, one, to measure it accurately, and what I was going to say is you can't use the same formula that's been used in the past. We're going to talk about this in our EX 2025 event, so I don't want to give too much away. But if you look at where we were, where we were pre-pandemic and during the pandemic, which also a lot of people like to refer, oh, we went to, work at home during the pandemic and it was nothing like everybody said it was. Well, yeah, because you took the same stupid stuff you did in the office and you tried to do it over Zoom. That's not equitable. That's not the right way to do it. And so they gravitate towards that, and I have fun finding the data points that say, oh, you're doing it this way. That's not the same delivery mechanism you have when you were in person in the office, right? It's like I equate it to laziness, to be completely transparent.
but it is. I mean, and again, the other thing is really what matters is what are the deliverables that contribute to the business outcomes, right? The P&L.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
if you're not, the rest of it just doesn't matter. I mean, not to, God, I can think of a million examples of where people all stood around in a circle and said, well, I did everything right. And yet at the end, the outcome was a complete failure.
Yeah.
And because people aren't aligned on what the successful outcome is.
Well, that's
Everybody's
the
in their little box and they check box and go, I'm done.
right
Good
there.
enough. Yep.
That's the key is they're following an antiquated, outdated checkbox. And there's a lot of people right now that are in leadership roles that got there because they were in an environment when checkbox policy or process was tolerable to have. I'll say it like that. It's the nicest way I could say it. And the companies were making P&L. Now, I would argue is completely up to the environmental circumstances that they're facing, right? But it's correlated. It's not causation, it's correlation with success. And so now some of these key leaders have moved on and they've got this same outdated checklist that everyone's following. And the people that were promoted and now that are taking the helm of leadership, are just used to following someone else's process and checklist. And so now they're trying to figure out, well, this isn't working. Well, we're following the checklist and it's not working. We're tracking employees, PwC. We're tracking employees where they're at and it's not working. Okay, well, maybe it's time to step back and say we need to look at what are the current environmental circumstances, variables we're facing now. Because guess what? They're not the same that they were even a year ago. There's such a high degree of variability in the global marketplace today that I don't want to say everybody, but a lot of people, a lot of respected people, or what used to be respected people, frankly, are like, oh no, we can just do this. It's not that big of a deal. There's such a high degree of variability in the global marketplace today that I don't see any major company really addressing. I think they're trying to sell products that talk about it at a 30,000-foot level, but they're not getting into the details needed to actually
Yeah.
provide a sustainable solution because the variability, I don't want to say it's like here to stay, but I do think for the next 2 to 3 years anyway, at the global scale, they're still going to have a high level of variability,
Well,
a ton of different metrics.
no, yeah, no, completely. And, I completely agree. And I think, I guess when I'm looking at these companies and going, what are you doing? Right? Like, why? Here's the problem. And we have the Gallup report from the beginning of the year, really, that the average employee engagement globally is 30%. And you as a CEO, and your executive suite of your job is to make sure that you've got the resources and that those resources are performing in a way that delivers or exceeds your business plan, right? Whether you're a privately
Mm,
held company or a publicly held company, that's kind of your job. And yet here you have the employee base underperforming for decades. This is not a pandemic problem. This is not, just not a new problem. And the solution in the past has been add more people. Oh, wait a minute. So my factory's running at 30% capacity. I'm going to just add more machines that are running at 30% capacity.
yep.
If I
I
do
wonder
that kind of,
why.
yeah,
I
I do
wonder
that
why
kind
my
of,
numbers aren't working.
right. And then, suddenly now, my labor costs are much higher than my activity. And then, oh, it must be that the individuals are not performing. And you go, maybe, but maybe the individuals really don't know what they're supposed to be doing and how to do it. And are they getting the coaching and guidance to be successful at it? I mean, I love these executives that want to do football analogies, sports analogies. And I think there are some good ones with what we have here in terms of sports.
Right.
We're on a sports team. If the team, it looks great in their uniforms and they give great pressers and they go out on the field and they look studly and everything else, and then
Yeah.
they lose the game, it just doesn't matter, right? Like the
Right.
only thing that matters is the score at the end of the day. And it almost doesn't even matter how ugly it was to get there. We've all been there, right? Like we've
Yep.
all watched these situations where we go, God, like that was the ugliest win ever, but it's
It's
still
a
a
win.
win.
Yep.
And we forget that. And if you're not performing on the football field or any sports field, the coach is going to pull you and put somebody else in because they can't, you can't wait.
Right.
But the problem also is that the coaches do what? They spend all of their time prepping those players to be as ready as possible for that event. What we don't
Exactly.
have, I think, in not just corporate America, I'm going to say in businesses in general, companies have lost this concept of coaching and education. You have the founder mentality, which is the, kind of a new name for an old behavior, but it's just like, I have to be the micromanager. I have to be the smartest guy in the room. I have to be yelling at people, and that's okay. And yet, when those people churn out of the organization,
Right.
because, maybe by the way, we've been there. Like we watched a senior executive come out of their office and start screaming at people, and you're like, what are you yelling about? We've never heard any of this before,
Right.
like, and you're like, well, and so you have a transparency issue. You don't have a clear direction issue. You don't have, do people feel like they have a voice in being able to say, that's a great idea, but here are some of the challenges I have in my
Yep.
team to be able to deliver against that. And if nobody's listening, all you're doing is setting on unachievable targets. And guess what? Once
Yeah.
people get halfway through the year and they realize they're at 10% of target, they give up. They're
Yeah.
like, I'll sandbag my if I'm a salesperson, I'll sandbag my good accounts for next year when I have a chance to actually make my quota.
Yep.
And if depending on how bad it is, they're probably looking for another job. And
Exactly. And you're getting the effort that's equivalent to someone else being as engaged as they need to not be fired.
and so what does that mean? And that's quiet quitting, or to take your pick. We used to call retired in place.
Yep.
Again, none of these behaviors are new. The question is, what is leadership doing about it? And again, we could riff on this for a wide range of things, but I do think in particular around this PwC thing, and I'd like to promote them or nominate them for our SDS annual award, which I think is a program we're going to kick that off as an ongoing program where every week we're going to take nominations from our listeners or from our own observations. We're going to talk about them in our SDS podcast. And then as we get into the end of the year, we're going to have an award for the company where we think and our listeners think probably had the biggest opportunity to stop doing stupid stuff.
Yep. And we want to hear from you guys too. Don't let us pick all the articles because we're a bunch of boring, number counter type of guys. So we will find maybe not the most exhilarating articles, but we want to hear from you guys too. Let us know what you think. And hey, if you've listened to our podcast before, Tim and I don't have a problem giving our opinions for several minutes on end, by the way. So we would love to hear from you guys on who you would like to nominate for the Stop Doing Stupid Stuff award. And we'll put a voting mechanism also online in LinkedIn and other social channels for us to capture your feedback and your thoughts as well.
All right. Well, with that, again, please, like and subscribe. We really appreciate your listening to us. And if you have comments on ideas on things that we can do differently or expand the conversation, let us know. We're excited to hear from you.
Yep, agreed. Thanks, everybody. And until next time, stop doing stupid stuff.
Love it. Take care.